In 1982, author Stephen King and legendary horror director George A. Romero teamed up to create a cinematic love letter to the horror comics of the 50s and 60s, adapted from some of King's short stories. They called it Creepshow. It was a decent-sized hit at the time and has become a beloved cult classic on video. But we're not here to discuss that one. We'll kick that can down the road to a future video. Right now, we're going to do a deep dive on the follow-up film, Creepshow 2. But, my friends, we'll get even more granular than that. Specifically, one segment of that film, the Raft.
Get away from there, Rachel! Die!
A lot of horror fans really love this segment. I've heard many say that it's their favorite story from the franchise. It's probably mine. Some, including special effects maestro Tom Savini, who worked on both films in different capacities, think it's the weakest story in the franchise. Except, of course, all 144 minutes of Creepshow 3. I think, though, whether you love it or hate it, this is one that nobody forgets. Well, where does this story come from? It originated in the mind of Stephen King, probably while watching the 1958 version of The Blob on TV while enjoying one of his favorite recreational substances. Of course, I mean Earl Grey tea. I hear the guy loves this stuff. He put it in his collection of short stories, Skeleton Crew. But it first appeared as this fun little insert in the November 1982 issue of Gallery magazine. If you don't know what Gallery magazine is, Wikipedia says Gallery is an adult magazine published by Magna Publishing Group. It is one of the more popular quote-unquote skin magazines that arose in the Playboy pattern of the 1970s. I used to have a subscription when I was 13, but I only read it for the naked ladies. I found the articles to be a bunch of hedonistic pseudo-intellectual bullshit written by wannabe libertines who never matured past adolescence. But what do sixth graders know anyway? In Skeleton Crew, the Raft shared the collection with 21 other King short stories, including The Mist. I never read that one, but I saw the 2007 Frank Darabont adaptation. It was good. I like the hopeful ending. I don't think I ever finished the last 5 minutes, but I'm sure everything worked out okay. I was really rooting for that kid. There's a supposedly true story King included in Skeleton Crew concerning the same piece of writing under the name The Float being accepted for Adam magazine. He was arrested in the town of Orono, Maine, for driving blitzed and removing traffic cones from the street after one of them had damaged his car. He was unable to pay the fine and was about to be thrown in jail when the payment check for The Float arrived, an event King refers to as asking to have someone send you a real get-out-of-jail-free card. Despite receiving payment, King has never located a copy of the magazine with the published story in it. In the written version of The Raft, the story pretty much plays out like the film version. 4 young friends drive out to a remote lake in the early fall for one last dip before it's too cold and the raft gets taken in for the season. Once they're out there, an amorphous blob of black goo starts menacing them, and it turns out to be pretty dangerous indeed, as the group get devoured in various ways by the goo over the course of about 12 hours. The Creepshow 2 version ends much differently, however. Here's a snippet. I'll bring in another voice to give you guys a break because some of you have been very clear in the comments that my voice can be quote-unquote grating. I can take a hint.
He stood on the raft. The sun went down. 3 hours later, the moon came up. Not long after that, the loons began to scream. Not long after that, Randy turned and looked at the black thing on the water. He could not kill himself, but perhaps the thing could fix it so there was no pain. Perhaps that was what the colors were for. Do you love? He looked for it, and it was there, floating, riding the waves. The colors began to form and twist. This time Randy did not look away. He whispered, "Do you love?" Somewhere far across the empty lake, a loon screamed.
Do you love? I mean, I don't think that's what I'd say to a murderous oil slick that just ate all of my friends. King can be quirky. At least there was no preteen sewer gangbang in this one, so that's a plus. If you don't know what I'm talking about, look it up. Longtime George Romero cinematographer Michael Gornick took over directing duties on Creepshow 2. The decision was made to film 2 of the stories in Arizona, Old Chief Woodenhead and The Raft. The thinking was to shoot The Raft there in hopes of warmer weather, even though the story was set in early October and the cold was meant to be a factor. It begins with a shot of a yellow 1978 Chevrolet Camaro LT 350 speeding down a winding High Plains desert road. 4 friends are on their way for a little autumn dip in the lake. Why would anyone do that, you ask? I don't know. But Stephen King thought it made sense. Now I know what you're thinking. This location doesn't look very autumnal. They chose to shoot this segment in the northern part of Arizona near Prescott, the thinking being that the weather would be warmer and more predictable. The lake is at 5,600 feet above sea level. They started shooting in mid-September. This might have been an unwise choice. Many slowdowns plagued the shooting. Storms came through and caused delays. Then the cold temperature of the natural spring-fed lake made filming a challenge, especially for the actors. Crew members that were required to get in the water wore wetsuits. No such luxury for the cast. Daniel Beer, who played Randy, was stricken with hypothermia and had to be hospitalized. When he finally returned to set, a paramedic was required to track his vitals, and he could only shoot a few takes before being sent back to shore in a boat to warm up and nap for several hours. He claims that he still has a permanent cold injury to this day. I looked it up and it seems legit. Apparently this is a real thing. Stay out of cold water for prolonged periods of time, kiddies. Although for legal reasons we don't give medical advice on this channel, so do whatever the hell you want, I guess. Anyway, so back to the story. Our 4 friends, Deke, Randy, Laverne, and Rachel, are just some crazy college kids out for an adventure. We could assume that they're in college because of some of the dialogue in Laverne's Horlicks University t-shirt. Horlicks. I'm 12. Horlicks is a college that appears a few times in Stephen King stories, most notably for the setting of The Crate in Creepshow 1. These characters say that they've driven 50 miles to the lake. If they're students at Horlicks, the assumption would be that they're coming from the general area of the university, since school would be in session in October in North America. But Phoenix is over 100 miles away, so where is this school supposed to be? The university scenes in the first Creepshow were shot in the Pittsburgh area, on the other side of the country. Of course, maybe they don't attend Horlicks. It could be that Laverne went there before changing schools, or that the t-shirt came from an old boyfriend, or hell, I guess a thrift store or something. Horlicks University also pops up in King's book, Christine. In the book, Horlicks is set in Pennsylvania. King was working on writing it concurrently with being on set of the original Creepshow, and apparently took inspiration from his location. But then where is the raft supposed to take place? If it's in Arizona, there's no major city within 50 miles of the actual location. Of course, within the context of the story, the lake could be anywhere, but by the look of it, it has to be in the southwest somewhere. If it's set in Pennsylvania, then no, it isn't. There's no lake in Pennsylvania that looks like that. The short story has the lake located 40 miles outside of Pittsburgh, for what it's worth. But the other possibility is that it doesn't really affect the story, so let's just let that one go and move on. Deke and Randy have adopted nicknames, Cisco and Poncho, from an old 50s TV show called The Cisco Kid, which itself was based on numerous films and radio plays that were in turn based on the O. Henry short story from 1907 called The Caballero's Way. Silent L. I don't speak Spanish. Why is the detail important? It isn't, but the TV show does make a cameo earlier in the film, appearing on the TV set in Old Chief Woodenhead. I believe it's an episode called Convict Story from 1950. I'll play it here in its entirety.
Here's adventure.
Just kidding. In the car, we get the feeling that Rachel is into Randy. God knows why, but he's intent on interacting with Laverne by sucking on her joint. Her feelings about Randy don't really pay off in the story, but it makes Rachel the most sympathetic character, as she seems to be the introvert who also gets killed first. Tough to be Rachel, I guess. Paige Hanna at the time, graced the role. She's the sister of Daryl Hannah, the star of another aquatic horror gem. Ugh, terrifying. She only showed up in a few things before this, and mostly quit acting to go into altruism. I plan to do the same thing when this channel hits 1 million subscribers, and I can finally help those poor downtrodden orphan children and abandoned dogs with canine lupus. Poor Scruffy. You know what to do. Subscribe, people. Why do you hate Scruffy? She did turn up in a memorable role as a Clamp Industries tour guide in Gremlins 2. You don't remember that? Me neither. Let's move on. Jeremy Green played Laverne. She has a very limited resume and seems to have dropped out of acting completely. One tidbit I did find is that she has an identical twin sister, and the two of them showed up in a Double Mint gum commercial in the early 80s.
Double your pleasure with Double Mint gum.
Fetish acquired. Wait, what? Forget I said anything. People are sick. Other people, not me. Paul Satterfield played Deke. He started his career on TV doing mostly soap operas and smaller roles on network series. Fans of low-budget sci-fi schlock might remember him from this gem.
On the edge of our galaxy, there is a battleground where alien warriors compete for the ultimate prize. I am champion!
Will a human?
Arena.
Which was shot in the late 80s but not released until 91. And he had a connection to the music world. His stepdad was Booker T from Booker T and the MGs. No shit. When it came time to do a sequel to Romero's Creepshow, he was no longer associated with the production company behind the series, and his longtime cinematographer Michael Gornick got the directing gig. Romero worked on the screenplay for a fee. Gornick started working in film in high school, making movies with his friends. He got a film and TV degree at Penn State and ended up applying what he learned in the U.S. Air Force during the Vietnam War, where he spent his time stateside. After hearing about the Night of the Living Dead being shot in Pittsburgh, he called up the Leighton Image, the production company behind the film, and asked if they needed experienced crew. The company was about to start shooting The Crazies. He ended up being hired in the sound department as the boom operator for a few days, before George Romero asked him to leave the set and go help shoot some commercial work they had acquired that Romero didn't have time for. George was happy with his work and brought him on full time. The next project was something called Jack's Wife, which became Season of the Witch when it was released in 1972. His first film for Romero as cinematographer was Martin in '77. He went on to work behind the camera, on Dawn of the Dead, Night Riders, the original Creepshow, and Day of the Dead.
George A. Romero's Day of the Dead, the most eagerly awaited day in horror film history.
He also directed episodes of Tales from the Dark Side. And the show Monsters.
It's starting.
Remember that one? Some weird shit in there. For Creepshow 2, Gornick was tasked with doing the film for about $1.5 million. Not a lot of money for a feature, even back in the mid-'80s. For the Raft segment, the effects team of Greg Nicotero, Howard Berger, Ed French, and Mike Tersick were tasked with creating the amorphous antagonist, as well as the grisly death scenes that play out over the course of the story. Ed French had worked with the producers and director Michael Gornick on Tales from the Dark Side a few years before, and has an interesting list of credits on low-budget East Coast horror flicks from the early 80s. Amityville 2, Sleepaway Camp, Chud, The Stuff, and who could forget Geek Maggot Bingo or The Freak from Suckweasel Mountain. I think Criterion is doing a release on that. Anyway, Nicotero and Berger were still quite young and were brought in because of their work on Day of the Dead under Tom Savini for Romero and team. The producers were happy with Nicotero's ability to be organized and punctual with the massive amount of zombie effects on the film, and asked him to join Creepshow 2 to manage the effects department. They were just coming off Evil Dead 2 in North Carolina. This didn't set well with French, who believed he was in charge, and some friction arose during pre-production. When the team moved to Arizona to shoot the first 2 segments, the production kicked off with Old Chief Woodenhead. They turned an old Texaco station into the effects shop. They called it Effectsico. Cute. The tension in the department continued, and shortly after the crew moved to the lake location near Prescott, Ed French was let go, and the remaining work fell on the heads of Nicotero, Berger, Mike Tersick, and Everett Burrell. Now, I've pieced this series of events together from interviews and articles, some dating back to the time of production. Depending on who's relaying the story, some of the details about who did what and when things occurred change. I've tried to put together the most accurate version I can, but of course I wasn't there. I think I'm pretty damn close. They had their work cut out for them designing the Blob. In the King short story, it's described as basically a circular oil slick, but thicker, darker, and more even. Oh, title of your sex tape. I'm a character. Ed French was originally tasked with creating the Blob, and under his supervision, the team used latex and polyfoam to construct the basic form. Nicotero describes how it came together.
We literally brushed latex on the floor of a big garage, and then I poured bits of polyfoam and foam in a spiral pattern, and then embedded junk like soda cans and Bob's Big Boy pieces and all this stuff into it.
The remaining team built everything for the segment in a weekend, working around the clock. They did a couple of different shapes for it: the monster, a round one, a more oblong one, as well as a few different ones for the kill scenes. They put the whole thing on a rig made of PVC and some flotation devices. Divers moved it around for most of the shots. It turns out Howard Berger hates water and despises working in, on, or around it, but was the one mostly on set working with the crew while Greg Nicotero and team were back at Effectsico making additional elements. On one of the shooting days, Howard Berger called frantically from the shooting location for Greg to bring more black ultra slime as quickly as possible, so he loaded up 2 5-gallon buckets in the backseat of a production vehicle and rushed off speeding to the location. Shortly before he got there, he took a fast, sharp turn, and the buckets both tipped, sending a wave of black goo under the seat and covering his feet as well as the entire floor of the car. As bad as that must have sucked, they were apparently laughing while frantically trying to clean up the car and recover the slime. I probably would have just walked off set, quit the business forever, moved to Canada, and changed my name to Jean-Pierre. But that's just me. The first to die was Paige Hanna's character, Rachel. They used a few different techniques to pull this off. When she first reaches her hand down toward the water, they had submerged an air mortar that would shoot black methocel and ultra slime up onto her arm. They also had a puppeteer wear black hot melt vinyl gloves that were used to reach out and grab her. In some cases, they reversed the shot and started with the goo already on her and then pulled it away, making it look like it was attaching to her in the final cut. When she went in the water, they used stunt performer and actress Patricia Tallman to double her as she sank into the goo. You probably remember Tallman as Barbara in Savini's 1990 Night of the Living Dead remake.
Is he dead? No! Is he dead? You're all seeing this. Is he dead?
Or is this Deadite in Army of Darkness?
You shall die!
I always had a thing for her back in the day. Only in the Deadite makeup, of course.
You shall never obtain the Necronomicon!
Now, I'm basing this on what Greg Nicotero said in interviews and the fact that Patty Tallman is in the credits as a stunt performer. But looking at the movie, it sure looks like Paige Hanna to me. And based on set photos, she definitely got covered in the goo for some scenes. So I'm not really sure about the accuracy of this or not. If anybody out there worked on the film or knows more about this, please comment below. I don't want to discredit either performer, especially because this looks like it would be a pretty bad day on set. For Paul Satterfield's death, they actually severed one of his legs to achieve the realistic look of him being... Wait. I think that's wrong. I've got to quit getting my information on Reddit boards. Let me see. Yeah, okay, no, it was foam rubber. Foam rubber, everybody. Forget that other thing I said. For Jeremy Green's death, they filmed most of the tighter shots with the raft rigged up vertically and pumped the goo through the slats onto her head. They just tilted the camera to achieve the illusion. It's pretty effective. Quick note here. A lot of people have mentioned online that our boy Randy here seems to be a bit of a sleaze, or worse. Not only for making the moves on Laverne after her boyfriend had just been killed and their other friend was recently consumed by the goo, but also because his advancements seem to be occurring while she's asleep and therefore not consenting. I say to those people, you're right. Let's move on. Don't worry, because Randy the rapist doesn't make it out intact either. He jumps in the water and makes it to the shore, but the goo monster, it turns out, is not confined to the edge of the water and rears up to envelop him. Nicotero and Berger explain how this was achieved.
We built a PVC frame that was like a tripwire frame, and we just attached a big giant square section of the blob to it so that when you tripped it, the whole thing would flip up.
Obviously, if we were to do that today, that thing would have been digital 100% and have a lot of fluidity to it and, a lot of different things. But at the time, everything was very low tech because we didn't have the time and no money whatsoever.
I think the effects team work in this segment holds up beautifully. Berger is right. If they did it now, it would most likely be CGI and probably not nearly as effective. Stupid CGI ruins everything. Now, the song that plays at the beginning of the raft is a little harder to nail down. It seems to be called Driving to the Edge of Time by Tim Broughton and Eddie Jones. Who are they, you ask? I have no idea. I think these are UK musicians because versions of the song have apparently popped up in a few films and TV movies over there. I tried to research this, but there isn't much. Tim Broughton may have been in a UK band called Chateau in the early 80s. Anyway, you can find the song for free on the Internet Archive. I'll put the link in the description for all you hair metal heads out there. If anyone has more info on the song, please comment below and you'll forever earn my love and gratitude. So, why focus on just one segment of Creepshow 2, you ask? As I mentioned, it's probably my favorite segment in the series, and the one that stuck out the most to me when I was younger. But also, honestly, I'm not that crazy a fan of the rest of this movie. It's fine. I enjoy watching it. But honestly, often I'll just zip right to the raft and then click it off when it's over. There is something so simple and pure and 80s about this segment, and I wanted to really get in depth with it and not end up with a 3-hour video. What do you guys think? Do you love this segment, or, like Tom Savini, do you think this is the weakest of the bunch? Please chime in below. Someday I'll dive into the other stories in this film, but until then, Dread Diver out. Scratch that, not quite out. If you find folks enjoyed this deep dive video, please like and subscribe and all that stuff. I'll be ramping up my output on this channel in the coming months, mostly because of positive encouragement from the comments section and messages I've received. I have several longer form essay type videos in the works, and I would love to hear in the comments any feedback or ideas you might have. So like I said, please chime in. I'm all ears. Now, Dread Diver out.